certainly been subjugated to centuries of domination by the imperial powers, particularly Britain. And so I think, if we want to understand how Nepal is dealing with the current crisis, we have to understand why it was so underdeveloped in the first place, and why it's not able to withstand natural disasters like this.
What has the government's response been like? I know we mentioned there the government saying it is doing all it can do. Should there be more put in place to protect the Nepalese?
Absolutely. I mean, anyone who's worked on Nepal knows that this has been coming for a number of years. There is a sort of cycle. I think it's about around every 80 years, if I'm not mistaken. So people knew that this was coming, but obviously it still comes as a shock. And I think always these situations are difficult to prepare for. Nevertheless, it has been it would have been important for there to be measures in place to support the government to deal with it. Now that those measures are being seriously tested and we're finding that there's certainly a lack in those structures being put in place. I think it's up to the international donors, particularly the US and UK, to give as much as they can, whatever it takes. I mean, we've seen that the US was initially giving $1 million. It's up that to $7 million. I think it even there's a recognition that wasn't going to be enough. The UK is only giving £5 million and 8 people. That's not nearly enough, and I think they do. That needs to change, and I think they do need to give whatever it takes in order for the humanitarian situation to be addressed, but also broader development.
Aaliya, Feyzi just mentioned there donors, international donors, what the international community are doing in regards to relief efforts. And of course, you mentioned the local teams who have headed out there. What stage are we at? And what more is going to be done, needs to be done? And how will things develop over the next few weeks? We're obviously in very early stages still.
Right. Well, this stage is one of the most critical stages, not only there's a huge amount that can be done in these next few weeks in terms of immediate support. So in terms of getting people safe shelter, getting people clean water, supplies of food, and also moving forward non-food items, so hygiene kits, kitchen kits, to make sure that as many people as possible can survive the next few difficult weeks. This immediate phase of the disaster is one of the most important. So our team on the ground now are assessing the situation, but I think we'll be distributing this week. I think we're distributing tents from Pakistan. We've managed to bring them in from there. We want to procure locally as much as possible to restart the economy in these difficult times, but if not possible from Nepal, we're going to procure locally from the region. So at the moment we've done Pakistan, but India is also an option. This phase of recovery is kind of key to getting as much as you can to as many people as you can in a very systematic way. So our team out there are working with the National Nepalese Disaster Cluster, as well as coordinating with other UN agencies and other DEC member agencies. Islamic Relief is a member of the DEC who are at the moment collecting on behalf of this earthquake.
How long does this stage last, and when do you start looking at the longer term projects?
Right, and so this stage, this initial phase, can sometimes last months, can sometimes last a few weeks. When we look at a case study like the Philippines in 2013, the immediate response was 1 to 2 months, and soon after rebuilding. When you're looking in the case of Nepal, you're in a country with much poorer country, with much harder infrastructure, as in very difficult infrastructure already that's now been ravaged. So you may be looking at longer in terms of getting access to places. The second phase is, of course, rebuilding, but not just rebuilding, but rebuilding better, ensuring people have earthquake safe homes, ensuring that people have access to different livelihoods. And the biggest thing is, of course, disaster preparedness. So in the event that these things happen again, people know how to react, people are better prepared, and people are safer.
Feyzi, can I bring you in there? Aaliya mentioned infrastructure. We know that many heritage sites have also been damaged, of course, alongside the devastating loss of life. What sort of impact will this have?
Well, I mean, I think that that will be a problem for Nepal in terms of the economy and getting tourism and so on, but also just generally, people have an attachment to that. They're absolutely beautiful buildings and so on. But again, I think all of this comes down to how that is going to be rebuilt. And, so it is up to kind of the international community to provide those funds. And to work with wherever possible the government. I mean, the government, of course, as you said in your piece, that it has been overwhelmed. But I think in terms of the kind of the response, it has to be coordinated. And I know there are efforts to coordinate. It's just that I think there has to be it has to be as centralized as possible because as we've seen, there are 1,001 different initiatives that of all kinds of people that are wanting to help, and I think that's all good, but it does need to be very much centralized, both in terms of the money coming in and in terms of the actual work on the ground, and then it's the actual kind of amount of money that the Nepali government and that the aid workers have at their
Feyzi, on that note, what sort of role do you think the neighbouring countries play in this?
I think neighbouring countries, have a big role to play. But again, I think India's response. You have to look at India's response also in relation to its political role in the country. I mean, the Nepali economy is tied to the Indian economy. That has to be taken into consideration. Every sort of economic decision or that Nepal makes, or political decision that Nepal makes, it depends on India, and that's a problem in certain cases. So yeah, I mean, I think whatever whether it's regional or international, I think it's not only up for those governments to acknowledge their role in underdevelopment in Nepal, but also to give whatever it takes. As I say, I mean, the amounts that have been given are not nearly enough, and so you as has been said, the rehabilitation phase will be the next. The sort of next phase that you need, it will cost millions and millions of pounds, not just a few million.
Just before we move on, Aaliya, if I could just ask you, are international aid agencies receiving the support that they do need from the government and their own international bodies?
So as Islamic Relief is a member of the DEC, and we are in contact with agencies on the ground, as well as being part of the National Disaster Cluster and liaising to ensure that no one is duplicating aid. But of course, we're still in that exploratory stage.
Okay, well, both thank you very much for joining us for that discussion. We will, of course, be following what's going on.